Hey, this is Andrew Brown. In this video, we're going to take a look at MSK. So this is if you want to have a Kafka cluster. And I just want to say that this was really challenging for me to do, not because Kafka is hard to interact with, but the issue is just the fact that in order to establish a connection, especially when they're recommending to use IEM, um, configuring the client to use um, the signer tool, like the AWS signer returns an authorization token to use your IAM policy was challenging. So I kid you not, I did this like 10 different ways. And then the only way I could get this to work was I followed the exact instructions verbatim from the AWS docs. Because if you get like the version of the Kafka client wrong with something else, or there's just so many factors. So we're going to be very diligent about following the exact instructions here. Even though I wish I had my own version, but that's just how it's going to have to be. So I'm going to look up MSK serverless because we can spin up a serverless cluster or a regular cluster. And I guess we'll just do a serverless one. And so there is a getting started tutorial here that we will carefully follow through. I'm not going to read it all because I generally know what we need to do for this, but I'm just showing you here are all the steps. So let's go ahead and create our cluster. And what I want to do is go to custom create, and I want to have a serverless cluster. Normally I use provision, but in this case I'm using serverless. I'll just say my MSK cluster, and we'll go down below and we will say next. We'll choose our VPC. I'm going to launch this in the default VPC. I cannot tell which one's the default one since there are two here, and I'm not sure why I have another one. So just in case there's another one that's just hanging around, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of it so I'm not confused. Why do I have two? They'll probably tell me why. It does not. But this one is the default one, so I'm going to get rid of this one if I can. So go ahead and just delete this one because I don't need to have two. This is just silly. But I must have created a service that ended up provisioning one. I can't remember which service that would have been. But I'm going to go back over to here, and we're going to give this a refresh. And so now we have our default VPC. I'm going to choose US East. Oh, we're in US East 1? I want to do this in CA Central. Sorry. We're going to start this over here. And that explains why, because in my CA Central one, I do not have a duplicate. So let's say my EKS, or not EKS, MSK cluster. And we'll choose serverless. I'm going to go next. I'm going to choose my VPC. I'm going to choose CA Central 1A, CA Central 1B, and that can only coordinate to those subnets because there's nothing else additional here. And we are going to launch this in the default VPC. So I'm totally fine with that. We'll go ahead and hit next. And notice it says we are using IAM role-based authentication. We'll go ahead and hit next. I don't need any keys or things like that, so I'm going to ignore that. I'm going to scroll on down, create a cluster. And this will create our cluster. While we're waiting for this to provision, let's make our way over to EC2. I guess I really don't need to look at the instructions too much here, but we'll go ahead and launch this instance, and this will be our Kafka client. And you might be asking, Andrew, why don't we use Cloud9? I tried to use Cloud9. It was very frustrating. But one thing I want you to know is that when you launch a cluster, it will launch into a VPC. And so the only way you can access it is through a VPC. Now, technically, there is the ability to set it with public access. I tried that. I could not get it to be public access. Maybe because it's a serverless cluster, I'm not able to do with that. I could not see anything in the docs that indicated that. Otherwise, we would have used something like Gitpod or something external to connect. But anyway, we're going to define our Kafka client. I'm going to stick with Amazon Linux 2023. And before we actually create this, I'm going to switch this over to a T3 micro. But before we create this, we'll need to have ourselves an IAM role for our EC2 instance. Now, normally I just use the SSM role, but we need to grant our EC2 instance to be able to interact with the cluster. So what I'm going to do is go over to IAM, and I'm going to create a new policy. And this one I'm going to call, I'm just going to go over to JSON here. And if we go to these instructions, they talk about the IAM role, and they talk about like, oh, you need these things, and I don't have time to deal with all these specifics, so I'm going to go ahead for this example. And also to make our life easy, just go ahead and grab this here and wildcard it. And then we're just going to go down here and wildcard it as well. And so that will be something that will provide MSK full access policy. We'll go ahead and create that policy. And It says it already exists, so I must have made one prior. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete the old one just so I can finish creating this one. I apologize. I thought I got rid of it. And there is this one here, but it doesn't give you the same kind of permissions. I don't think it does anyway. So if I go back here for a second, previous. So this is Kafka cluster, and this one, I don't see cluster in here. Right? So if you keep going through here, you do not see that. But this is the one I created prior. I'm just going to go ahead and delete that. And I'm going to make my way back over to here. We'll go next. We'll say MSK full access policy. Try this again. All right, and we'll create that policy. There we go, we've created it. Now we need to create ourselves a role. I'm gonna go ahead and do that. This is gonna be for EC2. We will go next. I want to give it permission to our policy there, so I'll just type in MSK. And then we also want to have SSM managed instance core. And so now we have both of them here. And so I'll go ahead and type in MSK, or this will be, sorry, Kafka client role. We'll go ahead and create that. And again, it looks like I have one from prior, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that as well. Just give me a second. All right, let's try this again. Create role. Come on, I got rid of the old one. Just let me make it. Fine, I'll just call it client. I'll put an S in there. Who cares? And so now we have our role. I'm going to go down to the ground. We'll go to advanced details. I'm going to drop down or refresh this, and now I'm going to search for Kafka. We have client's role. And the important thing is that we launch this in the existing security group, the default one. That's where the other one is. And I also just want to save myself the trouble by placing it in one of the same subnets, and that will make our life a lot easier. So with all those set, we should be in good shape. I'm going to proceed without a key pair. We'll launch it. And I'm going to go over to this instance, and now I'm waiting for this instance to be provisioned. It looks like our cluster is ready, which is great. And so there are options in here, like you can go in and set, where is it? There is an options to set a policy. So if you go here, you can go and create a cluster policy. I thought maybe I had to like give access to my IAM role in here, which was not the case. In fact, without anything there, it totally worked fine. Yeah, what we'll need here is this client information. So if we click here, we'll get our Bootstrap server. Now, what's interesting is I've seen people also connect and create topics utilizing the Zookeeper connection string, but when you use serverless, you have to use the described cluster version 2, and so you cannot necessarily get access to that Zookeeper client connection string, or maybe it's just not available in the serverless one. So using the Bootstrap URL or endpoint is totally fine for creating topics, but I do talk about that in the lecture slides, as you know. So we'll go back over to here, and I'm just waiting for this to be ready. So I'm going to wait for those 2 checks to pass, and we'll continue on. All right, so we have our status checks passed. We'll go ahead and connect to the client. And once we're in here, we're going to have to go ahead and install Java. I'm actually surprised it's not pre-installed. I would have thought it would come pre-installed here. But first, let's switch over to our EC2 user. So we do our sudo su-ec2, and we switch on over here. I will go back to our instructions. So we basically achieved this. If we go to the client machine, they talk about installing Java, so we'll go ahead and grab this. And the reason I want to follow instructions here is because they're using very specific versions, and I'm guessing that whatever it needs to work is what it is. So we'll get the right Java version, we'll get the right Kafka client version, even though there is a newer one. The thing is that if the Kafka version that is running on here is different, it might not work with a newer client. So that's where we might run into issues. But anyway, so that is now installed. So the next line is we're going to download the Kafka client. So go ahead and paste that in. And basically, if you were just to go and type in Kafka download, I'll just show you this here. Basically, what we are downloading is like this file here. But this one says 2.12.13, and so we are obviously using an older version here that perfectly works for our example. So we are downloading. Now we're going to unzip it or untar it, whatever you want to call it. Is this or TGZ? Yeah, whatever. Uncompress it. And so now it's uncompressed. If we do ls here, you can see we have this directory. I'm going to cd into that directory. And this is where we would start using the client. So if you go into the bin directory, I'll just show you here. Here's all the files that I showed you in the lecture slides. But before we can utilize this, we actually have to configure the client to work with MSK. And so we are going to have to first download a file into our libs. And I'm going to go over to here. And so we're downloading this thing called AWS MSK IAM auth. So we'll go ahead and download that. And so all this thing is doing is, I believe that is basically just using the AWS Signer API to sign a token for us to utilize. I noticed there are equivalent libraries, like if I'm in Ruby, there's one that's there that's getting integrated into the AWS SDK Ruby. So maybe eventually these will be directly integrated into the SDKs, and we will be able to directly integrate with, or like interface with Kafka using the SDKs. Because literally 9 days ago, someone at AWS was like, yeah, we're trying to get them into the library. So I'm pretty excited about that. But for now, we have to use this client, which requires a little bit of work. So that is step one. The next thing is we need to create a this file called client properties, which tells us to use this actual jar that we have and specify the protocol and things like that. So coming back over to here, I'm going to cd out of here. And other tutorials will actually put it in the root directory. AWS says to put it in here. It doesn't really matter as long as you're pointing to the right location. But we're creating this thing called client.properties. I'm going to use Vim to create this file. So I'm going to type in Vim, and then I'm going to paste it in. Notice I'm in the bin directory. Make sure you're there. I'm going to hit enter. If you don't know how to use Vim, learn how to use Vim. It's really useful. But I'm going to hit I to go to insert mode. See, I'm in insert mode down here below. I'm going to go back over to here. I'm going to copy these 4 lines. Right-click copy. I'm going to go back over to here. I'm going to go right-click paste. And so they're pasted in place. I'm going to hit escape to go into normal mode. I'm going to type in colon. See the colon down below? WQ, right quit, enter. And so now that file's in place. And so we'll go and now make a topic. So this is what we've been waiting to do for a while here. So we'll have to get the endpoint set up. So I'm going to grab this line here, just the BS equals part. I'm going to go back over to here. Whoops, I don't want to close that. And I'm going to go ahead and paste it. And so I'm going to give it a double quotation. I'm going to go back over here, grab this from our client information. Remember, this is our view client information to grab the Bootstrap endpoint. And we'll paste that in here. Now, what's interesting is that if we deployed in more than one AZ, we actually might see multiple endpoints here, and then we'd have to provide them with a comma delimiter. But anyway, we only have one, so that's easy for us here today. I'm going to go back over to here into the instructions, and this is kind of okay. We're going to grab it just from here because I don't want to do an absolute path. I'm just going to grab this here. We don't need 6 partitions. That's crazy. I'm just going to open up something like Visual Studio Code. Just give me a second here. I just need kind of a scratch pad to work with here. So, you can do this in whatever you want. But I'm just going to go here and format this a bit. So I want it to be, we're already in the bin directory, so we can just take this part out. And no, that's fine. We're providing the Bootstrap server. Notice the command config. So if this was somewhere else, we'd provide the path somewhere else, but we are in the same directory as it. We are creating a topic. I'm going to call this my topic. And partition will be 3 or 1. We don't need we don't need 6 partitions. That's crazy. So maybe just 1 here. That should be sufficient. Assuming it doesn't work, then we'll change it back. I said we'd follow it exactly, but come on. Let's make it make sense. And so here is our first line. I'm going to go ahead and copy this. If you want these, I guess I should go and place this in our repo. So go period. I actually was working with Kafka scripts here, but things were getting a little bit messy. So I'll open this up and place it in here again, just so you don't have to do the exact same effort here. But we'll go into Kafka or MSK, if I can find it here. MSK, where are you, MSK? Maybe I didn't push it. I don't see an MSK folder. Just give me a second. I'm going to run inside and go do a push. All right, let's take a look here. So I'm going to go back to my source control, give this a refresh. I should have a MSK directory now. I definitely pushed it. And, oh, I am in github.dev. I don't think it can really do source. I don't know if it noticed any updates here. Yeah, there we go. I'm going to try this again. Hit period. And I'm going to go ahead and grab my example here. And we'll go into our MSK directory. Where is it? Oh, it's called Kafka. What the heck? Anyway, yeah, you can see I made some serious attempts here. This is the later version, but Kafka code examples. I'll just do this here. So we know that's the failed stuff down below. That was unfortunate, all that stuff I had to do. But anyway, so we'll go here. And this will create our topic. So I'm going to look at the example I had down below here. Yeah, we specify replication factors. But anyway, we'll go ahead and grab this. And hopefully this just works first try. That'd be really nice. And I'll go over to here and right-click paste. Remember to be in the bin directory when you do this. Please work. And it's created the topic. Excellent. So now we have ourselves a topic. So the next thing is maybe we might want to write some data to it. So for this to work, we need a producer and a consumer. And I'm going to have to open this up in another tab. So I'm going to go ahead and connect this again. I actually didn't do this part, but I assume it's very easy. So we'll say sudo su-ec2user. And we'll go back over to our instructions, which is here. And by the way, if you're looking for this, I can also just grab the link and place it in here as well. I might as well. If I can find github.dev, here we go. And we'll go back over to here. And so now we need a producer consumer. So the first is our producer. So I'm going to grab this part and go back over to, I'm not even going to use my scratch pad anymore. I'm just going to go ahead and use github.dev. And I'm going to paste this here. And so we are already in the bin directory, so we'll just take this out of here. And yeah, we have our broker. And we have our client properties. This is my topic. So this will be our producer. I'll also prep our consumer while we're at it here. So grab this. And we'll go back over to here. I'm going to paste this in here as such. We'll get rid of this part. And it's interesting, like, they have it here, but they don't have it down there. I'm not sure why they're so inconsistent with their documentation. I know why, because they don't pay their SDEs enough. We'll say my topic, and it's from the beginning, so that's something we'll have to do. But where does it actually send a message? So we say, run the following command, enter any message you want. Oh, right, because once you run the producer, every line is basically a message. So we'll want a consumer set up. So I'll do the consumer first, because I believe we probably want that running before we do anything else. So we'll go ahead and copy this. And I need to cd into that directory. So we'll go into Kafka, into our bin directory, and we'll go ahead and paste this in. And so now our consumer should be establishing connection. Failed to construct Kafka consumer, unknown error. So you know what it is? I think that we'd have to export this again. I don't think that they would know about this. That's probably the reason why. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this and paste in our line here. If you're wondering how I got that back, I just hit up and down, okay? Basic Vim commands. We'll go ahead and try this again. I'm hitting up, and then we will try to run this and see if we can establish our consumer. Come on, consumer. I'm assuming that it's connected. I'm just going to assume that. I don't know if it actually provides any output. We'll go over to our producer, and we'll copy this, and we'll go to our producer tab, which is over here. We'll hit paste, and now it's connected. I can see the little thing here. Let's just say hello world. Enter. We'll go over to here, and we received it, and say goodbye moon. Enter. We go back over to here, and so we can see that reflection between the two. So yeah, I mean, that is the simplest example. If you're really implementing this for real, I would probably use something like, well, I like Ruby, but Every framework has their own thing, and so for Ruby, I'll just show you this really quickly. They have one called Karafuka. I don't know why it's called that. And so this is like a processing framework so that you can utilize Kafka, and it specifically integrates with Rails, and it comes with a web UI. So it's like extremely useful. But I can't say the same for a bunch of other tools. So it really just depends on what you're utilizing. But yeah, this is a really cool thing. And I suppose that if I was to do something more serious with Kafka, then we would go ahead and do this with a Rails app like this, because a lot of the other implementations are not as nice. They'll work, but there's just this one is just like butter. But anyway, I guess we can call this a success. So we'll go ahead and close this out. We didn't cover things like connectors or S3 delivery. So that's just other ways to bring data into our cluster. And I don't know. I mean, we could do it, but it's just a lot of work. So I will say we'll leave that for a different video. So what I want to do is go over to our EC2 instance, and we're going to go ahead and terminate this EC2 instance. I want to just save our examples here. So if you need them, you can find them later. MSK stuff. So let's just go ahead and commit that. But anyway, I'm shutting down the server, and then I'm going to go ahead and go over to our cluster and terminate our cluster. Delete my cluster. And, you know, we could delete the role and policy. I'm not going to do that. But I'll see you in the next one, okay? Ciao.